All right, well, given that it's 4:02, why don't we get started? I know we don't want to keep people any further longer than we want. Why don't you mute yourself right now? If you're not talking, that'd be great, just hearing that. Well, why don't we start the meeting for the Manchester Affordable Housing Trust dated March 30th. Yeah, just quick roll call. Peggy Hegarty-Steck.
Here.
Excellent. Muffin Driscoll.
Yep, I'm here.
Great. Chris Olney.
Yes, I'm here.
Sarah Mellish.
Yes, I'm here.
Do we have, Nancy Hammond?
Joan.
Joan?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, great. Okay. So Nancy is, okay. And then I am John Feuerbach. Thank you, everyone. The purpose I was going to say tonight's meeting, it's not like a hockey game. Day games are always called night. The purpose of this meeting is to follow up the meeting that we had, I believe it was on March 23rd, when there was a citizens presentation to the Manchester Affordable Housing Trust regarding a proposal relative to 1 to 3 Powder House. And subsequent to that presentation, it was suggested that we ask Mickey Northcutt, who's affiliated with the North Shore CDC, to join us to talk a little bit more about the plans that they have for 1 to 3 Powder House. So the single item on today's agenda is, and it was also posted, it's the discussion of the Capital Campaign Committee for the Preservation of Manchester Affordable Housing request for the Affordable Housing Trust to receive, hold, distribute donations earmarked for the purchase and renovation of 1-3 Powder House Lane by North Shore Community Development Corporation or Community Development Coalition. So we have Mickey here tonight, and Mickey, or tonight, this afternoon. Mickey, if you could just spend a moment to talk to us about the plans that you have now that it is public and people are talking about it. If you could just highlight some of the elements of the plan, if you can then segue into the role that the capital contribution will play in your endeavor. And then if we can end with comments and questions from the Affordable Housing Trust. But before you do, we haven't disabled chat, but if folks can be respectful and minimize the chat, that would be really great. We are recording the meeting. And last but not least, we want to limit the public comment to this item that we have on the agenda. We want to keep it specific to this matter. And we don't see this as a forum for comments or anything related to the 40B development that's being considered in town. But if we could just focus the discussion relative to the North Shore CDC action, as well as any role that the citizens group is playing in it. So with that, Mickey, I turn the floor over to you for a moment here.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. Nice to see you all again. Yeah, so North Shore CDC is under agreement to buy Powder House Lane probably sometime around May 1st. And we're doing, all the sort of typical due diligence on the property right now. And our plan is to buy it. I think your question was, how does the philanthropic capital relate to that? And essentially, it's meant to cover, roughly 20% of the purchase price plus some anticipated expenses for, any kind of initial repairs that will need to go on. not a full rehab, but like we know there'll be some things that we did take care of in either units or common areas in the first couple months of ownership. So we're still in the process of assessing really what that list will look like. And yeah, our plan is to get our property management under contract essentially on day one. We work with a third-party management company that manages all of our affordable housing, and they really specialize in the management of affordable housing. And our goal with them is to introduce themselves and us kind of simultaneously whenever we hopefully close on the purchase. And they part of their initial efforts will be to work with the existing residents to gauge the folks that are living there now, their existing income, so that we can have a more clear picture of exactly who's living there and at what levels of affordability they might qualify for. And that's an important piece of the process. So that's, I would say, our kind of first goal once we close on the property. And I mean, I'm happy to answer any specific questions you guys have. I'm not sure, you know, what else to add right now, other than we're really happy to have an opportunity to do this. And it seems like a needle in a haystack to be able to preserve some naturally occurring affordable housing, especially like this many apartments in Manchester. We're really excited about the opportunity.
This is Sarah Mellish. Oops.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Okay. So of course, one of the desires is when units are set aside as affordable, they get onto the state housing inventory. It's not clear to me what that process is and how long that type of thing takes.
Mickey, if you could talk about your experience on that and your expectation or your impression of how it will be pursued in this particular transaction.
Yeah, so all of our housing is listed on the subsidized housing inventory in like the different communities that we own housing in. We've never been through it where we buy a property like nationally occurring affordable housing like this and try to get it listed right away. And I guess there's a couple of reasons for that. One is, honestly, typically the types of housing that we've bought are in like really, really poor shape, and they wouldn't pass like DHCD, like housing quality standards. And like it really, to us, like as an organization, it doesn't necessarily matter if the property is listed on the subsidized housing inventory. So I understand in this case the effect that it would have on the town. So we're happy to like work on that. It's a bit of an unusual request, and I can't honestly say, I don't know from DHCD's perspective whether or how often they get requests to put properties on the subsidized housing inventory like this. I would imagine that they have gotten some before, so I can't imagine this is the first instance of that, but we haven't been involved in a request like this. Usually we would be, asked by the city or town that we're working in to like provide the affordable housing deed restriction, but that usually comes much later in the process. So in this case, I think we're perfectly comfortable working with the town to make such a request because, I understand the reasons why the town would want to do that. It makes a lot of sense. And I think that the important piece of that is, in order for us to talk about the timeline of I think it's more important to talk about the timeline of when we would be in a position to make such a request. And exactly how DHCD like processes that request, you'd have to ask them. I don't know exactly. I think we'd have to figure out between now and then exactly where that request should be made within DHCD, but I know that we can figure that out together. But I think to make a request like that, we need to first understand who's living there and really get a really clear income profile of everyone. There's a lot of anecdotal evidence that a lot of folks that are living in there might qualify, but we need to figure out like at what level and how many, like remove the speculation. And our property management company is aware of the all of the background on this, and is that we're preparing to do that. So there's another piece of this that between now and the time that we close on the property, we're going to draft what's called an affirmative fair housing marketing plan, and tenant selection plan, which are like standard documents that we have for all of our affordable housing properties. And those just speak to like how we market the property and how we select tenants to live there. And those are important. Those will need to be approved by DHCD. And they're not onerous. There's no issue with us getting those drafted before we purchase the property. That's in process right now. I think in a couple weeks time, we'll have drafts of those. And it's important that what we do once we buy the property is to not only have those plans in place, but to release any apartments that become vacant kind of according to those plans. And that's a really important thing. So I think one of the questions the information that DHCD is going to want and need to know is who's living there now, what income levels are they at, and are the appropriate plans in place to lease the apartments according to their policy, which are those two I mentioned, and are units being leased according to that policy on a go forward basis. And we would do that anyway. That's how we operate. So not just because we're hoping that DHCD puts this on the SHI. That's like somewhat of a separate issue related to that. When we've bought other properties in other communities, we put the same kind of paperwork in place, and we, as a practice, really all that means is that we market the property sort of publicly and create a waiting list so that units are filled from that waiting list and not just based on like personal relations.
Yeah.
It's important that the apartments are available to the general public, but that's how we lease all of our units. So I don't anticipate that being a huge challenge. In terms of getting like clarity on who's living there, I can only say we're going to do the best we can. In my experience, usually like the vast majority of people are pretty, willing. It's a fairly simple form. It's a 2-page form. We don't need to go through an entire income certification, at least not yet. And we'll mail them. We'll put them under people's doors. We'll make phone calls. We'll do our best to get as many as we can as quickly as we can. And I think when we get to like, let's say June, like, I don't know, let's say like mid-June, I think we're going to know the answer to what is the demographic of most people living there? And, in a perfect world, it'll be nearly all of them. I think we'll also have a good sense of, is anyone leaving? Sometimes I shouldn't say sometimes, every time we've bought properties in other communities, there's always one or two households who move on for whatever reasons. And I know from the seller that at least one household has given notice that they plan to move in May. And we've asked them not to fill that unit yet. We'll get it filled as soon as possible, but we want to make sure that it's filled according to that marketing plan, because that's, it's important. So we'll just have, I think by June, we'll know if it's going to be one household or three, or, we'll have to just like cross that bridge when we get to it.
Mickey, there was 2 questions that came out of the last meeting. I want to see if you can help us understand. One is, at the end of the day, after you've done your income certification and you don't have the full number, not 100% of the residents qualify, they're not income eligible. Is it your understanding that if you reach a certain percentage, then all of the units are considered affordable under the SHI, or is not the case? Is it just unit by unit? And then the second question is, when you do your income certification, let's assume it's 100% occupied right now. Those folks who are there, you're not going to be doing your affirmative fair housing plan for units that are occupied right now. It's really only for those that are vacant. You're going to set out the procedures and et cetera.
Yeah, the marketing plan like speaks to vacant units. So really, but when folks leave by attrition, right, we don't know what the situation is with the existing households. And I mean, with rental housing, whether you're market rate housing or in our portfolio, we have some turnover. People leave for all the reasons people move, right? They might be moving geographically, they might be, buying a house or condo. Like, you just never know what the situation is. So I think over the course of time, we see some turnover in our portfolio. I would expect Powder House is probably similar. I just don't know yet. We have copies of the leases that are there, and they're all over the map. Like, some of them are annual leases, some of them are month to month. And so we need to assess on a, unit by unit basis, like, what's everyone's story? And we need to understand, like, are they over income? Well, how over? Like, we just need to figure out, like, there's a real range of possibilities there. And my assumption is that the vast majority of people will qualify. And I just think the question is at what level of affordability. But it's not the case. I want to make sure you know one thing, that it's not the case that all 29 apartments like must be affordable on day one, because I would imagine not all 29 will be affordable. And it's not the case that if someone, if some number of them are over income, that means they have to leave. Because we've bought lots of properties in other communities before, and we have one in Salem right now, just as an example, that the organization before me bought these like 61 apartments, and I believe 6 of them at the time were over income people. They left those 6 as like technically market rate. But when those 6 individual households moved out, the organization began to rent them as though they were affordable. It still rented them to income eligible households. And now, almost 20 years later, we are, kind of refinancing and renovating those properties, and we're going to go ahead and deed restrict those other 6, because like, it's always our intention to make them all affordable, but now they're going to be like formally and like legally. So I think there's going to be, we need to understand like what the numbers are, whether it's like, is it 2 or 3 market rate households, or is it like 25? I don't think it's 25 based on what I've heard from operate the property right now, but that's still like, it's kind of speculative. We have to figure that out.
And can you help us understand the first question, and that is the affordability and eligibility for SHI based on unit for unit? So for example, if you have 25 that are eligible, those will be eligible for SHI, and whatever is over income, they would not, or is it?
Well, so I think, I mean, this is where like I'm pretty sure that the answer to that question is that it is very similar to the 40B rules, where only 25% of the apartments have to be, legally, technically affordable for the entire project to come on HI. It's like a nuanced question we haven't had to wrestle with much, because everything that we own is pretty much 100% affordable, with the one exception that I just mentioned, which is kind of an obscure exception.
Yeah, no, it is a unique one as well.
Yeah.
Affordable Housing Trust folks, any further comment? I have a couple points, but I don't want to hog the air here. Anyone else?
Yeah, I have a question. It's Chris. Mickey, would you expect there to be a deed restriction placed on the entire property early on in this process, or?
Yeah, I think that's part of the SHI proposal, really, is that once we understand who's living there, I think what we can do is draft an affordable housing restriction that will like correspond to the like kind of current goals for affordability, if not 100%. I mean, obviously, if everyone living there is already qualified, then we can do 100% affordability. But if not, I think we would want to do a kind of scaled back number where we have like enough affordability for the property to be, to meet the town's goals, but also that's why I want to speculate exactly what that will look like, because it's important to know who's living there. But yeah, I think what we will do, so if we have an affordable housing restriction, we can't just record that. We actually need DHCD to kind of review that and approve it. So what I imagine what we would do is, craft the argument in the form of a memo of sorts, and ask them to approve the affordable housing
And I assume your expectation is that at the end of the day, or the end of whatever year, all of the units will be affordable, not just 25%.
Eventually, yeah.
Yeah, but
I think like in the short term, we want to figure out how many people are living there and how many units are either vacant or expected to become vacant in the like near term future. And those, I can tell you that I know that what we would do is release any vacant units to households below 60% of median income, because that's our long-term goals. Most of our housing is 60% or below, with like certain apartments for folks at 50% or 30%. But you know, 60% is our general baseline that we target. Not to say that people at 80% are not still considered low income for the purposes of like DHCD. We just don't normally focus on that population.
And your mission as it would be applied to the powder house would be at or below 60.
Yeah, I mean, we could serve 60, 80. We have a project in our pipeline that right now that's got a few market rate units. There's like reasons specific for that particular property, but we're allowed to serve a range of incomes. Our practice is that usually we sort of view affordability as like 60% or lower. So I think with this project, like in the long run, by attrition, we're gonna, if and when folks move on for whatever reason, we're gonna release those units to people at 60% below. That much I can say for sure. And I think that in the affordable housing restriction, that's how we will couch it for sure. But we're gonna work with our attorney that drafts those with us to make sure that we're drafting that correctly. Like again, it's like doing an affordable housing restriction. I'm not sure whether we can do that where we sort of say we're going to achieve a certain amount by attrition, or whether we just set a level of affordability that corresponds to the kind of existing low-income people plus any vacant units. I know we can do that. I think the question is can we somehow restrict the property to correspond to like the long-term strategy? And we just need to sort that out between now and like say June.
But your intention is not to evict anybody just because they're income overqualified.
No, that's not our intention.
Yeah.
Any other comment, question?
I just had a question.
Go ahead, Peggy.
Hi. So for the Affordable Housing Trust, in terms of this project, what is it that North Shore CDC would need, in terms of a way to show support or something else? I know there was talk of being able to accept donations. So I'm just curious what would be helpful to you for North Shore CDC in terms of supporting this initiative at Powder House?
Yeah, thanks. Well, I think whether you all accept donations that are, I don't know if the right terminology, if I'm using, if it's earmarked for this project, or if you contributed funds from the existing pool of funds that you have. I'm not sure if you have other plans for that, but I think it would be helpful to the project in general to have some amount of support, either or both of those, just as an evidence that the town's Affordable Housing Trust supports, the idea that we're converting this property to affordable housing. So I think that would be really good. And I think I just would kind of pose the question back too, is like, do you all have an application process for the existing funds that you have?
Yes, we do. And we're totally supportive. We have our shingle out, making our funds available. So Mickey, that's something for you to consider if you believe that there is a need and there's support that would be needed for the transaction. We do have an application process.
John, I have one more question.
Go ahead.
Um,
Sarah, I'm sorry.
On this overall project, I saw something in the paper today, Friday, in the Cricket, indicating you were looking for X amount of additional funds. Where do you stand on the overall raising of funds? It seems to me that there was like 250,000 needed and there was a 50% match or something. I don't know.
I would defer to Leslie or Bill to clarify that exactly.
The capital campaign is raising $1.25 million to sort of the working capital for this, and will enable the North Shore CDC to get out their bank loan. So we are in the final phase of that campaign, actually. We'll be closing on Monday, the campaign. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so what would happen if we wanted to make the Manchester Affordable Housing Trust wanted to make a contribution?
Oh, we would love that. That would be really wonderful. And you and I can connect if you'd like. I like Mickey said, I think that would be really wonderful and important, for this project and in the eyes of the state as well.
Sarah, I think there would be support from the Affordable Housing Trust, but I would suggest that in the same way that we invite applications from all property owners, developers, I would invite Mickey to address that directly to us, where he can identify what that need is. Now, it may be based in part on Leslie's assumptions on capital contributions, and then Mickey might be considering some soft debt from DHCD or something. We could step in to provide whatever gap support that might be needed. But I would suggest that let's work directly with the developer who would be the applicant.
All right.
Given the tight time frame, this is Bill Cross. Might I pitch in here as well, John?
Go ahead, Bill. Yes.
So given the tight time frame, might it be easier, Mickey, for you to let the Capital Campaign Committee finish its work and close out the campaign over this weekend, announce the results on Monday, and then work with the Affordable Housing Trust over the month of April and perhaps May to determine what, if anything, the trust might be able to do to help on the immediate post-closing costs?
Right, definitely. I think it's the case that if we're going to apply to you all for support from your existing pool, then I think that, those funds would almost necessarily be coming in post-closing. I think what we're working on is kind of a list of repairs that we want to take on in the first, say 3-4 months of ownership. So I think that, that's probably what we would focus that application.
Just a question of flow of funds and when you would need the funds, Mickey. With the capital campaign, when do you expect to have those funds? And I'm just, if there's a possible.
So in order to, in terms of whether the capital campaign that's been raised flows directly from donors to North Shore CDC, or if it flows through the Affordable Housing Trust, we need to have essentially 20% of the purchase price in order to get our financing commitment, because we're seeking a loan that's premised on that. We don't, in order for us to get not only close, but to get the financing commitment, we have to have evidence of funds. And North Shore CDC has funds, but we don't have that many funds that we could contribute to this project absent the capital campaign. And let me look at the calendar here. I believe our finance contingency is April 22nd. I have to double check that, but I'm almost positive our contract is February 22nd, and April 22nd is our financing contingency deadline, which will, other than that issue, I don't anticipate a problem. We should have the appraisal by the end of the week, I'm told. And, 22nd would give the bank plenty of time to close by May 3rd, which I believe contracts.
So you're saying you would want the funds in hand by April 22nd? Or before?
Yeah, in order to get the financing commitment, because part of their underwriting, like I guess the final piece of the underwriting is, do you have the 20% down?
So
That's
the
helpful. And
that-
when do you think you'll have your due diligence complete? Sorry, I just said.
End of the week or next week?
That's wonderful. So if we were to, for example, plan on April 12th to begin to convert those pledges to gifts of cash and appreciated stock, whether through North Shore CDC directly or indirectly through the Affordable Housing Trust, with those coming in no later than Monday the 19th. That would work in your schedule.
Yeah, I just need to pull up that contract. I can probably do that while we talk, but I just want to make sure. I will actually, but I just want to make sure that is that I'm getting that date correct. 1 second. One second. If you have other questions, I can listen while I wait for my computer to load.
Can I ask one more?
Go ahead, Leslie.
Oh, thank you. I'm just getting not a lot, but several requests asking about matching donations. Like just this afternoon, there was one, Microsoft maybe could do a match. I'm not really sure how to answer that.
Are you asking me?
Yes.
So these are corporate matching grants, which would be effectuated once the gift comes through. So it would be after the pledge is or in the process of the pledge being converted to a gift.
Could I ask maybe just a point of information? Leslie, I don't want to diminish the importance of that, but perhaps that's something that you could work that logistical thing offline with Mickey. I'm just trying to figure out and focus on the role that the Affordable Housing Trust can play as a possible conduit to funds and really air out any questions or comments related to that.
Mm-hmm. All right.
That's okay. I think I'm just trying to think the productive use of this meeting here.
I can get back to you, Leslie, about that.
Great.
Affordable Housing Trust folks, any other question or comment?
So I have, I guess, a more general question.
Go ahead, Chris.
Excuse me, Muffin. So my understanding is to get these units onto the SHI is going to require some kind of municipal action. Some sort of, we're supposed to do, the town has to do something. And sometimes that's through the issuance of a comprehensive permit. Sometimes it's with funds from an affordable housing trust. Sometimes it's a memo of understanding between the town and the developer. So Mickey, I'm wondering what role, how do you see the town participating in this transaction to make it eligible for a listing?
Well, Chris, I think we have to talk about that, right? Like I think any request for DHGD to put the property on the SHI is, I think DHGD would view that as a town request, because typically they do go to cities and towns to handle that process. They don't come directly to developers anyway, but I would imagine that we would want to make that request together because we would necessarily be able to answer a lot of questions that DHGD would have. And they would care about those things I talked about earlier, like having the right tenant selection plan in place and releasing, and we would be the ones to generate a draft affordable housing restriction, for example. So like, but I think that request technically would be viewed as a town request. So we have an attorney who has advised us on a lot of fair housing issues over time, who I've talked about this with before. I, plan to talk with them again. That firm would be drafting an affordable housing restriction and, advising us on this. And I think that particular question that you're asking, whether an affordable housing trust contribution would be, enough in that request, or whether there needed to be some sort of MOU. My understanding with the MOU is more that we would be committing to put it on put an affordable housing restriction in place.
Yeah.
We're more than happy to do. So if that gets documented by an MOU, like, we're perfectly willing to do that. I think that's a question for one of the attorneys that very specifically focuses on this process. But we have such a person, like, we're happy to bring in. And I guess my question to the town is, who should we be having that conversation with? Like this board or the town manager, or, if there's a town council, like who's the appropriate person we should engage with about that specific issue?
So
Very
in
good
terms
question.
in terms of putting it on the SHI, that's the Board of Selectmen.
Okay.
That would request that. This board could certainly take it to them, have it all laid out, but they are
Right.
the decision maker. They are the one that need to sign the request to make that request to the town. That's my understanding. We're speaking with the DHCD a few days ago.
Oh, good. So we're more than happy to talk with whoever the right person or people are there. And I expect what we'll do is draft an affordable housing restriction, kind of like as we start to understand who's living there, so we know what shape that will take. And that sounds like that might be the kind of thing that I present to you guys, so that if you're making a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen, it's to approve essentially of our affordable housing restriction that the town is. I think typically when we're doing that in any normal transaction, the city and the state both review and approve those anyway on every deal that we do. So I think that would probably be an appropriate process for this one as well.
So Mickey, John, may I ask, this is just a,
Sue Brown, town
yeah,
planner.
just a question in terms of operations and all your other properties. I'm assuming that your property management firm does all the qualifications on an annual basis, and there really isn't any other additional capacity needed at the town level to do that. Is that the case, or?
Yeah, our property management company is all the qualifications. Thankfully, we don't do that ourselves anymore either. Yeah. No, that's what they do. And as Peggy knows, the Peabody Properties is the company that we work with, and they're currently in the process of certifying all the incomes of the households who are going to be moving into our next project is Harbor Village, the one that's going to be opening up in June in Gloucester. So we're sorting out with the management company whether that's going to be the same people or different. I think it might actually be different people, just because we have people that are like directly focused on Harbor Village right now. I think in the long term, once all these properties are leased up and sorted out, it's the case that we're probably going to have one property manager who manages both Harbor Village and Powder House Lane, because the geographic proximity is pretty convenient.
So just on an annual basis, the DHCD sends confirmation sheet. We have to confirm the numbers every year. So
Yeah.
Those are the type of things we just need to coordinate with your property manager so that we have easy access to that.
Oh yeah.
So
we
that
do
can
that
confirm that.
Yeah, so many people ask us for like basically certifications that say that we're actually meeting the obligations of our affordable housing restrictions. I think for you guys, knowing that we have that affordable housing restriction in place is the most important moment. So unless we find that everyone there is already income qualified, I would imagine we'll probably have an affordable housing restriction that would make, a number that is fewer than 29. I don't know the number yet, but presuming that there's at least one household there that's over income, then we would have I would imagine we would have a first affordable housing restriction that speaks to what is realistic now or soon. And then I think that if we were to have something like an MOU, it would be acknowledging that our long-term plan is to turn those 100% of the units into affordable housing, so that you guys have us on the hook for that beyond my word. And so that if that's happening 8 or 10 years from now, whenever it's happening, that that we've committed to that in writing somewhere, and we're perfectly, that's without question our intention. But, I think the idea is that it's not at the cost of folks that are currently living there, right?
Okay. So I just, Muffin, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, in our meeting last week, Sarah raised the question or thought bubble surrounding what happens if the donations flow through the housing trust from the capital campaign, and then something happens with the project and it doesn't go forward. How do we manage or handle all of that donated money? And was that something that got run by town council or?
Yeah, thank you for reminding us of that question. Yes, so we did pass that by town council. They confirmed that we have the ability to accept earmarked funds, and she didn't see anything that prohibited us from returning those funds if something didn't go through,
Okay.
if the earmarked project didn't go through. So,
okay, thank you for getting that confirmation.
yeah,
So
thanks.
if I'm not mistaken, if they're not earmarked, they come to the Affordable Housing Trust and there's really no limitations. But if you do earmark them, for example, if a donation is earmarked to North Shore CDC for the purposes of this development, then no problem. But if the project goes south, I think it gets a little complicated, because if the funds if they're with us, my understanding is we can return them. But if we are acting as a pass-through and send them to the North Shore CDC, technically it's it's no longer in our jurisdiction. So I think that would be a matter that would have to be dealt with between the donor and the North Shore CDC.
North Shore CDC.
But to the extent that they're still in our inventory and we haven't done our technical pass-through, my understanding, based on what you forward from the town council, we have the ability to return them.
Great.
So, Muffin, follow-up question, or you're all set?
No, I'm good, thank you.
So, I guess this is more directed to Bill and Leslie, and I don't. We will be, the Manchester Affordable Housing Trust will be a pass-through to the North Shore CDC, and we are doing it for a number of reasons. It's a centrally located property, units that could flip and be on the private market any moment. So as Mickey mentioned, the importance of preserving natural affordable housing is very important to us. So supportive housing inventory units, I think that's an important goal, but I think it's just really, for us at this point in time, it's really just to preserve that housing. But from the perspective of a donor to the Citizens Campaign, is there an expectation that will there be disappointment? Let me put it that way. Will there be disappointment and perhaps dismay if a certain number of units do not end up as SHI? And I say that in the whole context of, in the backdrop of the 40B and the town trying to get to the 10%.
I mean, we have prefaced this to donors that, number one, we just feel that this is doing the right thing. on the master plan, Manchester residents said that having more affordable housing was at the top of their list. So if people understand that this is about doing the right thing. Of course, everyone is hoping that it will result in getting on the SHI pretty quickly as well, but that's something we, don't really have any control over. So I think people understand that. Does that answer your question at all?
No, I think that does. Yeah, I think as long as folks understand that ultimately that will, or that's the goal, but it will take some time to get there, given what Mickey has outlined, and given their mission, and given, until Mickey does the income certification, you won't know. And there's no impetus to have anyone leave just to get an at or below 60% AMI unit, which would then become part of the SHI. So it's just going to take some time, I believe.
I would echo what Leslie has said, and just add a reference to another important constituency here, which are the residents themselves. And they are not only residents, but also citizens and neighbors, and in many cases, longtime friends of other people, including me. And many of them want to do everything they can to support North Shore CDC's process here. And many of them are thrilled that this is providing a long runway for them to stay in the middle of Manchester in their homes without fear of disruption. And so that can accelerate the process. That's an important constituency that is allied with the rest of the town and with Mickey in this going smoothly and rapidly. Mickey's being conservative about the period of time it takes to go through the interview process. I think with the residents themselves seeking to make Mickey's life as easy as possible, perhaps that can go more quickly. And likewise, once that process is finished, my guess is that people in Boston will be delighted to hear about a local solution to a local problem. It's up to them how much delight they engender, this process engenders for them. But this is a pretty special situation. Mickey referred to it earlier as a needle in a haystack. There are enormous numbers of people who have rallied around in a way that makes a great story.
Great. So just for one, Mickey, I don't know if I don't want to cut you off, but if there's anything you wanted to add to that or say.
No, I don't think so.
So I just want to do, at least for me, one final clarification. Really, the discussion and the request right now in front of us, notwithstanding, Mickey, you say that perhaps at some point in the future you would approach us with support for MAHT funds for rehab or whatever. The discussion here and the request is for the Affordable Housing Trust to receive, to hold for as probably the split second in time, and then to distribute funds to the North Shore CDC. Is that correct? Is there anything else is it as simple as that?
I think it's as simple as that, because I think the primary goal of the trust's involvement speaks to Chris's question, is ensuring that there's a public contribution and like a clear local support for it. It might not be the only way that we cover local support. We might need to have an MOU. And for example, I would be happy to have an MOU related to that, related to those funds, saying we're receiving those clearly for the purchase of this property and with the clear intent to establish affordability. Because I don't think, like, for example, we definitely need the funds to close, but we won't have an affordable housing restriction the day of closing, because we don't know exactly what level of affordability we should be committing it to without a little bit of legwork.
Yeah.
But yeah,
okay.
we would be happy to work with, if you guys find that you want to do this and are able to do it within the timeline of
Yeah.
the kind of closing that's laid out, we would be happy to work with you on getting some sort of MOU in place
I was thinking
before
the same
closing.
thing. So unless there's any other question or comment, I would like to pose a motion that, and do we have a second? Subject to an agreeable MOU between the Affordable Housing Trust and the North Shore CDC, and to the extent that the citizens group is a party, I make a motion that the Affordable Housing Trust receive, hold, distribute donations earmarked for the purchase and renovation of 13 Powder House Lane by North Shore CDC. Do I have a second?
Second,
Any discussion, or is that right? Or do I say all in?
No, you asked for discussion, and I
Discussion.
have a question based on this.
Okay, go ahead. Why don't we just open, motion open, we'll have a discussion. Go ahead, Chris.
So it seems to me it's appropriate for North Shore CDC to submit an application to the trust for funding. I'm not sure it has to happen before or after we approve this motion, but
Yeah,
at
this
some point, I
motion-
think an application has to be filed. Otherwise, we
yeah,
can't act on it.
I see this motion as separate and distinct
Right.
relative to the receive, hold, distribute question, but I would, just speaking for myself, I would certainly encourage Mickey to work with us to consider additional funds as needed.
I think it's different, Chris, because these are earmarked funds. So these are donations being earmarked for a specific project.
Well, can
That's
we,
different than an application.
shouldn't we be dispersing funds with, whether or not they're earmarked? Don't we have to be responding to an application for the funding?
No,
For this,
It's functionally more like almost a fiscal sponsor than anything else. It's a pass-through, correct?
yeah,
yeah,
right.
I see it as different.
yeah, whereas an application for funds, we would evaluate that, and on that basis, we would then we'd make a commitment of funds to the applicant, which would be, I see that it is separate on this, which again is just a pass through, as long as we have an MOU. And any other question or discussion?
I would just say I would echo the fact that this is a rare opportunity, and to find that number of units, to be able to preserve that number of units in such a centrally located place is very rare on Cape Ann. So I think whatever we can do to help support that with the state and ensure that they know there's local support for it, I would encourage.
I guess a quick question as part of discussion. Mickey, is there any, when you think about your affirmative fair housing plan, other than what you said, it's going to be at or below 60, is there any other special preference that you would be trying to get a agreement on, or special population, or is it just going to be general marketing?
You know, the only other thing that was, I had a meeting about this week. We discussed putting in a preference for folks who need whatever accessibility exists on the property, so that if we have, for example, a unit that has accessibility, that we would have the ability to prioritize that unit for someone who actually has a disability that would help. That's pretty typical for our tenant selection plans. And I just happen to, I actually don't, I can't tell you right this very second what level of accessibility exists, but I believe that there is some. And I know that there are some folks who are interested in applying who have a need for accessibility. So that's why it sort of, we're specifically chatting about that. But no, other than that, no.
And for all this to be successful based on the timeline, I have a note here that says pledges would be converted and they would be submitted to us, and we would get them out the door to you no later than April 19th for you to,
No, no, we get them in the 19th and get them to them on the 22nd, right?
no later than the 22nd. Is that correct, Mickey?
You know what? I went to go look that up and then I came back to discuss other things with you. So one second,
that-
let me just.
Well, that's not important now. That's a detail that we could work out. I think the purpose of the motion is to get authorization on a vote to participate in the receiving, holding, distributing. The detail of when we do that, I think we can also
And
work that out offline.
and that we'll enter into an MOU,
Thank you very much. Yes,
which will contain the details.
yes. Any further discussion? Discussion closed. How about a vote? All in favor of the motion? Hands?
Aye.
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 That's, Peggy, I hear a yes.
Yes.
Muffin,
Yes.
Chris,
Yep.
Sarah,
Yes,
Joan.
Yes.
I think
John.
Nancy's on.
Oh, Nancy. Oh, I'm sorry,
Here.
Nancy. Hello,
Yes.
Nancy, and then John. Yes. It's unanimous. So we have approval for the Affordable Housing Trust to act as the pass-through to receive, hold, distribute. Unless there's any other matter or comment related to this.
Jeff's question is, in terms of the MOU, should we
Thank-
draft that or would you all draft that?
I would ask that you draft that. Sue Brown, we don't have any counsel to draft that.
So who do we do? If I ask our council to draft, it would be an MOU between the CDC and the Manchester Affordable Housing Trust to receive, we'll figure out the dollar amount when appropriate. And for the acquisition of Powder House, basically. And will we send that to you too?
Yes. And I'm just thinking out loud, Bill and Leslie, to what extent do we need, you're going to be encouraging people to send earmark donations to us.
Yeah, so this is a two-step process right now. I've only collected pledges at the moment. We have about 185 pledges right now. And they all know that I will be sending them a gift form. I'm going to send it by email, and we're going to be asking for a 48-hour turnaround. So I will work with Bill on drafting, all of you on drafting that form so that I get the language right, that they should be making their checks out to the Manchester Affordable Housing Trust or North Shore CDC, and just get the language right for earmarking it. So it would be great if we could be on an email together with this so that I can have this, ready to go.
Well, thinking out loud, at a minimum, we would need to have a letter acknowledging receipt and then putting our 501c3 status and stuff like that in it. We've done this once before when we've had funds earmarked for a specific purpose. I see us doing something similar to that. I guess that's something we could also work on offline.
Yeah, that would be great to work through that offline. Because Mickey, you have experience in this. This is my first time doing something like this. So I'll be looking for guidance.
No problem. I'm going to email our attorney right now and say, help us whip something up. I think we'll just keep it simple, right?
Yeah.
We'll try to keep it simple, and the amount we'll confirm when we're all clear on what that's going to look like, and we'll try to work on this, get it started right away, right?
Yeah.
Great.
But for other trust members, and specifically Sarah, I don't see a need to have an MOU with the citizens group, really, because they're just encouraging
No.
people to contribute to us, and we're just going to acknowledge it by form of a letter. And
Right, our only agreement is with the.
North Shore CDC.
yes, okay. I just wanted to clarify that. Okay.
And just to be clear, to set expectations right, what we're trying to do is give people where those who are very much hometown focused can give to North Shore CDC through the trust. But I suspect that most people will say, let's just give directly to the trust. It's not necessary to go through this indirect route. So I'm guessing there are not going to be that many donations that go through the trust, but we're trying to give people choice. And so all the more reason to be keeping the memorandum as simple as possible.
Okay.
But people have been quite confused. So I will say what Bill is saying, people will say, well, North Shore CDC is buying it, so why am I not writing my check to them? So if we can use simple language and give people the choice, that would be ideal.
John, just, do you want to just take a vote on allowing the payment to town council to review this, or what is your expectations in terms of our review? Do you just want to do it on your own, or? I know we keep tapping the town council, but.
Why don't we, I'll put a motion together that to the extent there's review needed by town council and to the extent there is a fee charge to that, is there support for paying that small fee to town council? Do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so that's the second. Great. Yeah, so, but Mickey, why don't you start out and send it, Sue Brown is the hub and the wheel. She can then send it out.
No problem.
And then Leslie, why don't you and I, unless there's another idea from my fellow Affordable Housing Trust folks, Leslie, communicate with me about the receipt of the contributions and our acknowledgement, so we're on the same page. And then I'm just also thinking aloud here, Joan, we should probably be prepared. I'm assuming we were going to be getting these checks, just depositing them in our Affordable Housing Trust, but then writing a check out to North Shore CDC.
Right.
So we need to operationalize, and we don't need to set up anything different, right? We're just using the same account.
So Joan, we should, maybe the three of us are on an email together. And we get the logistics, and then I'll rope in Bill once we have some things.
Okay. So why don't we just say Leslie, Joan, JF.
All right.
Email on that.
And
And
can I
I'd
just,
like to remind everybody that if we don't get any checks, that's going to hurt a little bit in demonstrating town support for the project.
Right, because I thought that was one of the reasons that the trust was being asked to kind of act as the conduit.
Well, we can encourage people to. I'll write my check to you.
All right.
Will I?
can I ask Sue a question?
Go ahead, Nikki.
Sue, if you guys have ever made an award from the Affordable Housing Trust to another project, do you have some sort of agreement that speaks to that award? Because I feel like that might be a helpful type of document for the lawyers to change the form of it and change the facts. Is there some sort of template language that they should include that speaks to us?
You are lucky enough to be our first.
Oh God, really?
Other than to the emergency rental assistance program, which I think is maybe different. So I don't know if there's anything in there that would be helpful in crafting this MOU. But I think if we can just bullet point a few points together and then flesh it out, I think that will work.
Okay.
It doesn't need to
Makes
be
sense.
onerous. Yeah.
I don't think it will be. No problem.
Yeah.
And I just want to be clear, when Sue says this is our first opportunity, I just want to remind folks that we've only been around, I think, for 4, maybe 5 years, and we started from ground zero. We had 0 funds, and we've been accumulating funds through contribution, through support from the community preservation. So we're steadily increasing our funding base to the point where we can now maybe even start considering that we can be an active player. But before then, we had more of just, we were trying to establish our mission and making contacts, et cetera, but we really didn't have any funds to play with. So this is, now we're getting into a more of an interesting phase on our existence. So, okay, unless there's anything else, why don't, do I have a motion to end the meeting?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone. Bill,
Thank you.
Bill, Leslie, Mickey.
Thank
others.
you. Nice to see you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, and thanks for all the work you guys are doing on this.
Thank you, Jen. It's a big team. Thanks so much.